When a wounded German shepherd gave his final warning, everyone thought he was dangerous. But one retired Navy SEAL saw something different in his eyes. Not rage, not defiance, pain. On a snowy training range in Montana, one wrong command could have broken a dog, a handler, and a man still haunted by war. So Warren Ashford stepped forward not to prove his strength, but to stop everyone from mistaking control for cruelty. And what happened next changed the way an entire training center understood fear, loyalty, and healing. Tell us where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep these stories alive. By the time Warren Cole Ashford reached Cascade Sentinel Range, the morning had already turned white. Snow lay clean across the roofs of the steel training sheds, gathered along the fence wires, and softened the hard edges of the parked utility trucks. Beyond the compound, Flathead Lake sat under a pale winter sun, blue-gray and still, as if the whole world had taken one long breath and decided not to move. Warren parked his old pickup beside the visitor trailer and let the engine idle for a moment. He did not like arriving at places that still smelled like command: diesel, gun oil, wet nylon, burned coffee, young men trying to sound older than they were. Older men pretending they were not tired. He sat with both hands on the wheel, feeling the dull ache in his right shoulder wake under the cold. It always did that in Montana winters. The joint tightened first, then the muscle, then the memory. Not a full memory. Warren had learned to shut those doors before they opened. Just a flash of pressure, light, dust in his teeth. Someone shouting his name from a place he could not reach anymore. A warm weight pressed against his thigh. Havoc had lifted his head from the passenger side footwell. The German shepherd was 8 now, though he still carried himself with the grave patience of a dog who had never once believed age gave anyone permission to stop paying attention. His coat was a deep burnished gold under a black saddle, his muzzle dark, except for the gray beginning to frost his chin. One ear stood clean and sharp. The other carried a small tear along the edge, a mark from another country and another life. Warren looked down at him. "I'm fine," he said. Havoc blinked once, unconvinced. That was the problem with old working dogs. They did not care what a man said. They listened to breathing, pulse, the small betrayal of fingers tightening around a steering wheel. Warren exhaled, slow. He released his right hand, flexed it once, and reached into his coat pocket for the worn metal coin he carried everywhere. He rolled it between thumb and forefinger until the world returned to its proper size. "Just a consulting job," he muttered. In and out. Havoc's tail tapped once against the floor mat. Cascade Sentinel Range was not a military base. Not exactly. It was a privately run training center with contracts from county tactical teams, search and rescue units, infrastructure security groups, and veterans transitioning into civilian response work. That distinction mattered. On a real base, rank made bad ideas harder to hide. In places like this, money, pride, and sponsorship could blur the chain of command until everyone heard only the loudest voice in the room. Warren stepped out into the cold. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and solid in the way old timber was solid. Not polished, not decorative, simply difficult to move. His olive-gray field jacket was faded at the seams, patched at one elbow, and zipped over a cream thermal shirt. His boots were dark with melted snow. His ash-brown hair, cut short but not severe, had gone silver at the temples. A close salt and pepper beard traced his jaw, neat but not vain. Nothing about him announced Navy SEAL. That was intentional. Havoc jumped down after him, stretched his left hind leg once, then stood at Warren's side without pulling the leash. The dog's harness was dark green, plain except for one small patch stitched along the side. Steady. Warren had not chosen the word because it sounded strong. He had chosen it because strength without steadiness had ruined more men than fear ever had. The range was already awake. Trainees moved between buildings carrying shields, padded batons, coils of rope, and cases of simulation gear. Somewhere, a radio cracked with static. A generator hummed near the equipment bay. Downrange, voices rose and fell, and the cold air. Then came a sound Warren did not like. Laughter. Not the tired kind after a hard drill. Not relief. Not camaraderie. This was sharper. Younger. The kind of laughter men used when they wanted someone else to feel small. Havoc heard it too. His ears shifted forward. Warren followed the sound around the side of the administration trailer and stopped near the edge of a concrete training pad dusted with snow. At the center of the pad stood a woman in a Navy field jacket, one hand low, palm open, body angled carefully in front of a German shepherd tethered near a concrete post. She was in her late 40s, lean, with dark hair pulled back at the nape of her neck and a stillness that did not belong to office staff. Her boots were planted, but not aggressively. She was not trying to dominate the space. She was trying to calm it. Warren knew the difference. The dog behind her was younger than Havoc, maybe 6, with a darker black saddle across a gold coat and a narrow blaze of tan fur between the eyes. His name, stitched on a worn recovery harness, was Bishop. One rear leg trembled slightly as he shifted weight away from it. Pain, Warren thought, not rage. 3 trainees stood too close. One had a training shield tucked under his arm. Another held the leash too high, tightening the collar every time Bishop tried to turn his head away. The third, a compact man with a square jaw and restless shoulders, was doing most of the talking. "Come on, Mara," he said. "You keep treating him like he's made of glass. He's going to act like it." The woman did not look at him. Her eyes stayed on Bishop. "Lower the leash, Troy." Troy Vance gave a short laugh. "That's what I mean." The dog growls and everyone steps back. "Great lesson. He's not challenging you," Mara said. "He's asking for space. He's a working dog. He's an injured working dog." The words landed in the cold, but no one picked them up. Warren felt Havoc's leash go gently taut. Not a pull. A question. "Not yet," Warren told him, with 2 fingers against the leash. Havoc stilled. For a moment, Warren was not looking at Troy, or the shield, or the careless hand on the leash. He was looking at Bishop's mouth, the small lick over the nose, the ears pinned, then released, the eyes sliding toward the open left side of the pad, searching for an exit that the trainees had unknowingly closed. The dog had already spoken 3 times. No one had listened. Mara shifted half a step, placing herself more clearly between Bishop and the men. She was not afraid. That worried Warren more than fear would have. People who were not afraid sometimes waited too long to move. "Troy," she said, quieter now. "This is the last warning. Step back." One of the trainees smiled. Another muttered something about rehab dogs and soft rules. Troy looked past Mara at Bishop, his jaw hardening. It was not cruelty Warren saw in him. Cruelty had a different shape. This was fear wearing armor. A man who had been hurt once and had decided that being first, faster, harder, louder would keep it from happening again. Warren had seen that kind of fear in team rooms, in police briefings, in his own mirror. It always thought it was discipline. The leash tightened again. Bishop's body went rigid. Mara's hand lifted, not to strike, only to block the trainee from stepping closer. That was when Havoc made a sound. Low, deep, not loud enough to threaten, just enough to tell Warren the margin had run out. Every head on the pad turned. Troy saw the older German shepherd first, then the man, holding his leash. His eyes took in Warren's faded jacket, the gray in his beard, the lack of rank, the lack of badge, the lack of anything that looked important to a man still measuring authority by volume. "This area's closed," Troy called. Warren stepped onto the snow-dusted concrete. He did not raise his voice. He did not square his shoulders. He did not reach for the coin in his pocket, though he wanted to. He looked at the leash, then at Bishop's trembling leg, then at Mara, who had not moved away from the dog. Finally, he looked at Troy. "Release the collar," Warren said. "Everyone takes 3 steps back." Troy's expression tightened into the beginning of a smirk. Behind Warren, Havoc stood perfectly still, the word steady, visible against his harness. The cold seemed to hold its breath. And Warren knew. with the old tired certainty of a man who had spent half his life arriving 5 seconds before something broke, that this morning was no longer about training. Troy Vance did not step back. For 1 second, nobody moved. Snow slid from the edge of a roof somewhere behind the training pad, landing with a soft thump that sounded too gentle for the air between them. Then Troy smiled. Not fully. Just enough to tell the other trainees he still believed this was his ground. "You a safety observer?" he asked Warren. "Because we're in the middle of a controlled exercise." Warren kept his eyes on the leash. "Nothing controlled is happening here." The trainee holding Bishop's collar shifted his grip higher, either from nerves or pride. Bishop's rear leg buckled half an inch, and the dog's throat tightened around a growl that sounded less like threat than pain trapped inside muscle. Mara's face changed. Not fear, calculation. She started to turn toward Bishop, but Troy moved at the same time, reaching for her sleeve as if to pull her out of the way. It was not a punch. It was not meant to injure. That almost made it worse. People did careless things with more confidence when they believed they were still being reasonable. Warren crossed the distance before Troy's fingers closed. He did not strike him. His left hand caught Troy's wrist and folded it inward, just enough to break the line of force. His right forearm came across Troy's upper arm. Not hard, not fast enough to be dramatic, but exact. Troy's body followed the pressure his mind had not agreed to. One knee hit the snowy concrete. The sound was small. The silence after it was not. Warren released him immediately and stepped back, both hands open. "I didn't do that to beat you," he said, voice low. "I did it to stop the next injury." Troy stared up at him, breathing hard, more shocked than hurt. The other two trainees lifted their hands halfway, uncertain whether they had just seen an assault or a lesson. "Drop the leash," Mara said. This time, the trainee obeyed. The tension came off Bishop's neck. The dog coughed once, then pulled his head down and away, weight still trembling over his bad leg. Mara did not rush to grab him. She lowered herself slowly, one knee near the snow, palm open but not touching. "Good," she murmured. "You're all right. Nobody's taking your space." Behind Warren, Havoc moved, not forward in a charge, not into the conflict. He stepped wide, slow, and stopped at the edge of the pad. Warren gave no audible command, only a small downward turn of 2 fingers. Havoc lay down. The old German shepherd angled his body away from Bishop, showing his side instead of his teeth, his torn ear flicking once in the cold. It was such a quiet act that most of the men missed it. Bishop did not. His growl thinned. His eyes moved from Havoc to Mara, then back to Havoc. The injured dog still shook, but the hard line along his back softened by a fraction. Mara saw it too. Her jaw unclenched. For the first time since Warren had stepped onto the pad, she looked at him not like an intruder, but like someone who had understood the conversation everyone else had been interrupting. A door opened across the yard. "Someone want to explain why my evaluation just turned into a parking lot fight?" The man coming toward them wore a dark blue parka with the Cascade Sentinel logo stitched over the chest. He was thick through the middle but still carried himself like a Marine who had not forgiven civilian life for lacking formation lines. His hair was black at the sides, silver at the temples, his eyes already counting witnesses, liability, damage. Elias Rourke. People still called him Captain, though Warren knew enough about contract training centers to guess the title had followed him from an older uniform. Troy pushed himself upright, rubbing his wrist. "Sir, this guy interfered with the drill." Rourke looked at Warren. "And you are?" "Warren Ashford, temporary consultant." Something moved behind Rourke's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or the memory of a name he had seen in a contract file and hoped would stay quiet. Before he could answer, another figure stepped from near the observation shed. Nolan Price looked too clean for the yard. Gray technical coat, black gloves, polished winter boots, tablet tucked against one side like a judge's folder. His face was narrow, controlled, and unreadable, in a way that made every expression feel chosen. The dog reacted exactly as projected, Nolan said. The handler intervened emotionally. Then an outside party escalated physically. Mara stood, snow clinging to one knee of her pants. Bishop reacted because your trainees ignored distance, pain response, and leash pressure. Nolan's gaze barely touched her before returning to Bishop, then to his tablet. Or because the animal is no longer stable enough for active demonstration. Warren felt his right hand curl once before he opened it again. Not yet. Rourke exhaled through his nose. Enough. Get the dog checked. Reset the pad. We'll review this inside. He needs a vet now, Mara said. He'll get one, Rourke replied, but his voice carried the impatience of a man thinking about sponsors, schedules, and the cost of embarrassment. As if summoned by the word, a woman in a teal field jacket came briskly across the yard with a red medical bag over one shoulder. She was small, sharp-eyed, with auburn hair pinned back in a way that said she had already worked through one emergency before breakfast. Dr. Laurel Haynes knelt beside Bishop without asking permission. Her hands were quick but careful. She checked the rear leg, then the collar area, then looked up at Rourke. This dog was cleared for low-stress exposure, she said. Not close contact pressure. Rourke frowned. That's not what the evaluation packet said. Laurel's face went still. No, she said. It wouldn't be. The words were quiet, but they changed the temperature more than the snow did. Warren looked from Laurel to Nolan. Nolan did not look surprised. He only locked his tablet screen and slid it under his arm. Havoc remained lying at the edge of the pad, steady as a stone marker in winter. Bishop, still shaking, lowered his head until his nose nearly touched Mara's boot. And Warren understood that the dangerous thing at Cascade Sentinel was not the injured dog. It was the version of the truth someone wanted everyone to train around. The review did not happen in the yard. It happened in a conference room that smelled of burned coffee, wet wool, and new plastic equipment, still wearing its manufacturer's pride. Through the window, Warren could see the training pad being reset, as if nothing meaningful had happened there. A trainee dragged the shield rack back into place. Someone brushed snow over the scuffed concrete where Troy's knee had struck. Clean ground, dirty problem. On the far wall, a new banner hung beneath the Cascade Sentinel logo. Faster control. Cleaner outcomes. Warren read it twice and disliked it more the second time. Rourke stood at the head of the table, one hand on the back of a chair, trying to look like a man managing an inconvenience instead of one staring at a crack in his operation. Nolan Price sat to his right with his tablet open. Mara remained standing near the door, arms folded, jaw set. Dr. Laurel Haynes had Bishop's file spread in front of her, in a fan of clipped pages, color tabs, and handwritten notes. Warren did not sit. Havoc lay beside his left boot, quiet, but not asleep. This center cannot function, Rourke said, if every training evolution turns into a debate. Now, it turned into a debate because it stopped being training, Mara said. Nolan's eyes remained on his screen. The animal displayed escalation under moderate pressure. Laurel looked up. He displayed pain response under inappropriate pressure. Doctor, Nolan said evenly, with respect, operational environments do not pause for pain. No, Laurel replied. But competent handlers adjust for it before they create a bite. Warren watched Rourke flinch at the word bite. Not much. Just enough. There it was. The fear behind the paperwork. Rourke turned to Laurel. You said the packet was wrong. Come. Laurel slid one page forward. My clearance note says Bishop was approved for low-stress exposure only. Open distance. No collar loading. No shield compression. No forced cornering. Nolan tapped his tablet once. The packet I received listed him as fit for controlled demonstration. And mine didn't, Laurel said. The room became very still. Warren reached into his pocket and rolled the old coin across his knuckles once, hidden by the table edge. He was not thinking about Troy now. He was thinking about words people used when they wanted harm to sound professional. Controlled demonstration, acceptable pressure, asset stability. Rourke rubbed the bridge of his nose. Bishop was a working dog. Mara's voice softened, but only slightly. He still is, just not in the way you want him to be. That sentence landed harder than Warren expected. Because for a moment, it was not Bishop in the room. It was every man Warren had known who came home with a body that no longer obeyed the old job description. Every handler who missed the dog they had trained. Every operator who believed usefulness was the rent they paid for being allowed to stay alive. Nolan turned the tablet so the others could see a clean graphic. Drone silhouettes, thermal grids, response time charts. This is exactly why Peregrine is developing non-biological first contact systems. Dogs are exceptional tools until emotional attachment clouds risk assessment. Machines do not panic. Machines do not form trauma associations. Machines do not require rehabilitation. Mara stared at him. Dogs are not tools. Nolan's expression did not change. They are operational assets. Havoc lifted his head. No growl, no movement toward Nolan. Just a slow, steady lift, as if the word had disturbed something old in the air. Warren glanced down. Havoc's eyes were not on Nolan. They were on Bishop's file. The small patch on his harness, steady, caught the room's fluorescent light. Warren had heard men call dogs assets before. He had heard men call other men assets too. It was always easier to spend something after you renamed it. Laurel gathered the file pages and placed one photograph on top. Bishop, in deep snow, younger, alert, standing beside an older man, in a red and black wool scarf. Behind them, a collapsed cabin roof bowed under white weight. "That is Owen Rusk," Laurel said. Bishop's former handler, Idaho Search and Rescue. Bishop found 2 adults under that structure before his rear leg went through an ice shelf. He did not fail out of service. He was injured during it. Rourke looked at the photograph longer than Warren expected. Nolan did not. "History is valuable," Nolan said, "but current capability determines deployment." "Then test current capability honestly," Warren said. It was the first time he had spoken since entering the room. All eyes shifted to him. He nodded toward the banner. "Faster control sounds good on a wall, but if your people cannot tell the difference between threat, fear, and pain, all your training is speed in the wrong direction." Rourke's mouth tightened. "You have a recommendation?" "Yes. Stop calling it compliance. Start teaching contact control from the first warning sign. Distance. Voice level. Exit path. Handler, authority. Medical override. If a dog or a person is telling you they're at threshold, you don't prove toughness by pushing them past it." Nolan closed the graphic. "That sounds slow." "It is," Warren said. "So is staying out of court. So is not getting someone mauled because a camera needed a better angle." The line should have ended the meeting. It did not. Rourke dismissed them with a promise to review documentation. It was the kind of phrase that meant nothing had been decided, except everyone would pretend there was time. Outside, the sun had dropped behind a bank of white cloud. The range looked brighter and colder at once. Mara walked Bishop along the fence line with a loose lead. Laurel followed a few steps behind, watching the rear leg. Warren stayed back with Havoc. "Easy," he murmured. Havoc did something Warren had not asked for. He lay down in the snow, angled away from Bishop, giving his side to the younger dog. Bishop stopped. For several seconds, he only watched. Then he lowered his head, not relaxed, not trusting, but less alone than he had been that morning. Mara saw it and said nothing. That silence was the first honest thing Warren had heard all day. Later, near the equipment board, Warren found the updated training schedule clipped beneath a magnet shaped like the Cascade Sentinel badge. Cold weather response evaluation. Participants: Ellison, K, 9 Bishop. Demonstration window: Friday, 2000. 100 hours. Sponsor observation. Peregrine Defense Systems. Warren read the line again. Then he looked through the window toward the yard, where Bishop stood in the snow beside Mara and Havoc lay steady at a distance. The morning had not been an accident. It had been a rehearsal. Warren found Rourke in the operations office just before dusk, standing over a desk crowded with budget sheets, sponsor agreements, and a half-cold mug of coffee. Outside the window, snow moved sideways in thin white threads. The range lights had come on early, turning the yard into a series of bright islands and dark gaps. "You need to cancel Friday," Warren said. Rourke did not look up. "You've been here less than a day." "That was enough." Rourke gave a humorless breath. "Easy thing to say when you don't carry payroll for 38 people. Warren glanced at the papers. He understood more than Rourke probably wanted him to. Maintenance costs, insurance increases, a delayed county contract. Peregrine's logo stamped on a pending equipment grant large enough to keep the center breathing through winter. "This isn't about pride," Rourke said, softer now. "If that sponsorship falls apart, I lose instructors. I lose the K-9 rehab wing. I lose the veteran transition program. People around here don't have another place like this." "Then don't let the place survive by becoming something it wasn't built to be." That landed. Rourke finally looked at him. His face carried the exhaustion of a man who had spent too long choosing between bad options and calling it leadership. Before he could answer, Mara stepped through the open door with Bishop's folder under one arm. Snow freckled the shoulders of her navy jacket. "If Friday happens under Nolan's rules, Bishop becomes evidence." Rourke frowned. "Evidence of what?" "That he's dangerous," Mara said. "That rehab is sentimental. That dogs like him should be retired out or replaced." Rourke looked away first. Warren watched it happen and knew Rourke was not blind. He had simply been avoiding the cost of seeing clearly. "Then give him something else," Warren said. Mara turned. "What?" "A better test. One that proves your point without making it look like you're hiding from pressure." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting we still run an evaluation?" "I'm suggesting we stop calling pressure the same thing as competence." By 7, they had taken over a side classroom near the equipment bay. Warren erased half of the whiteboard and began again, not with tactics, with distance, approach angle, voice level, leash slack, exit path, medical override, handler authority, stop condition. Mara added notes in tighter handwriting beneath his. Laurel joined them 20 minutes later with a veterinary threshold chart and the dry impatience of someone who had said the same thing too many times to people paid not to hear it. The fourth person came in without knocking. Sergeant Maeve Donnelly carried a clipboard, a radio, and the look of a woman who considered nonsense a waste of oxygen. She was 50, broad-shouldered, with steel-gray hair cut at her jaw and a black stopwatch hanging from her neck. "I hear people are trying to make Friday less stupid," she said. Warren liked her immediately. Maeve had run range safety for 6 years. She did not care who sponsored what, who had rank once, or whose logo sat on the banner. She cared about timestamps, signatures, lanes of fire, weather, and whether the person giving an order was qualified to give it. "If we do this," she said, tapping the board, "I log every audio change, every approach command, every stop call. No off-record adjustments from the observation shed." Mara looked at Warren. There it was, the first piece that could not be explained away later. Rourke hesitated at the doorway, watching them turn his sponsored demonstration into something harder to manipulate. "This could still cost us," he said. Warren capped the marker. "So could pretending you didn't know better," The room went quiet. Rourke did not agree, not out loud, but he did not tell them to stop. That was enough for now. Later, Warren found Troy in the equipment shed, sitting on an overturned crate with one wrist wrapped in a black brace. The younger man had been pretending to inventory rubber batons, but the same baton had been in his hand for 5 minutes. "You here to finish the lesson?" Troy asked. "No." Troy laughed once, bitter and embarrassed. "Could have fooled me." Warren leaned against the doorframe. The shed smelled of canvas, cold metal, and propane from a heater ticking in the corner. "You ever been bitten?" Warren asked. Troy's hand stilled. After a moment, he pulled the sleeve of his right arm up just enough to show a pale crescent scar near the forearm. "Federal warrant service," he said. "Wrong hallway. Bad intel. Dog came out before the handler did." "Dog's fault?" Troy's jaw worked. "That's what I told myself." Warren waited. Troy looked toward the open door, where the yard lights turned the falling snow silver. "I still hear it sometimes. Not the bark. The sound before. Nails on tile. Fast." There was no swagger in him now, no performance, just a young man angry that fear had found a permanent room inside him. Warren knew better than to offer comfort too quickly. "Fear doesn't make you weak," he said. "But if you dress it up as control, somebody else pays for it." Troy looked at him then, not grateful, not fixed, but listening despite himself. "What do you want me to do?" "Friday, you don't go first." Troy's face hardened. "So I'm benched?" "No. You observe Bishop." "I'm not a vet." "You don't need to be. You watch his ears, mouth, tail, weight shift. You watch for the first warning, not the last one." "That's it?" "That's harder than charging in." Troy looked down at the baton in his hand, then set it back into the crate. For him, it seemed to cost something. That night, just before Warren left the canine wing, an older man came through the outer door carrying a red and black wool scarf in both hands, like he had forgotten he was wearing it. He was thin, stooped, with silver hair flattened by a knit cap and eyes that went straight past Warren to the recovery kennel. Bishop lifted his head. The man stopped 6 feet from the gate. "Hey, Bish," he said. His voice broke on the second word. Mara stood beside Warren. "Owen Rusk," she said quietly. "His former handler." Owen did not enter the kennel. He did not call Bishop to him. He only lowered himself onto the bench outside the gate, slow and careful, as if any sudden hope might hurt the dog more than distance did. Bishop stared at him for a long time. Then the injured shepherd gave one low, uncertain whine. Owen closed his eyes. "He doesn't bite because he hates people," he said, barely above a whisper. "He bites when people stop hearing him ask for help." Warren looked at Bishop, then at Troy's empty place beyond the yard, then toward the classroom where Friday's plan still waited on the board. For the first time all day, the problem felt bigger than Peregrine. It was not just about saving a dog from a bad test. It was about teaching a room full of people to hear a warning before it became a wound. By Friday night, the snow had stopped falling. That made the range feel more exposed, not less. Every roofline, fence post, and boot track stood under the floodlights in hard white detail. The training pad looked almost beautiful from a distance, polished by cold and framed by dark pines. Up close, it felt like a stage. Warren stood at the edge of it with Havoc at his left knee and his hands bare despite the cold. Gloves dulled the fingers. Tonight he wanted to feel everything. The leash, the air, the small shift in his own pulse when something went wrong. Across the pad, Maeve Donnelly checked her stopwatch. then raised her clipboard. Audio log active. Weather clear. Surface icy in patches. Veterinary override. Present. Laurel nodded from beside the medical cart. Mara stood with Bishop 20 yards away, one hand resting lightly on the loose lead. Bishop wore his recovery harness, the worn search patch visible against his shoulder. His right rear leg was wrapped, supported, but not hidden. That mattered. No one was pretending he was uninjured anymore. Troy waited with 2 other trainees near the approach cone. No shield this time. No raised baton. He still wore the black wrist brace, but his hands were open at his sides. Warren could see the effort it cost him not to clench them. From the observation shed, Nolan Price watched behind the glass, with his tablet held against his chest. Rourke stood beside him, arms folded, expression unreadable. Maeve spoke into the radio. Evaluation begins on my mark. Contact team. Slow approach. Handler maintains authority. Stop condition remains active. A beep sounded. The trainees moved. At first, it worked. Troy took the left angle, not straight toward Bishop's face. The others held back. Mara kept her voice low, steady, almost conversational. Bishop's ears shifted. His tail stiffened, then eased. His eyes moved from Troy to the open lane behind him. He had an exit. Warren let himself breathe. Then static cracked through the speakers. A metallic shriek followed, too sharp, too sudden, like a gate being dragged across concrete. Bishop flinched so hard, his wrapped leg slipped. Mara caught slack in the lead but did not pull. "Audio spike!" Laurel snapped. Maeve looked toward the shed. "Who changed the level?" No one answered over the radio. The sound came again, louder. Bishop's body locked. Troy saw it before anyone else spoke. The ears, the mouth, the weight shift. The old warning arriving early. He lifted one hand, palm out. "Back up. 3 steps. Open left." One trainee obeyed. The other froze. Troy turned on him. "Move." The word was firm but not panicked. Warren watched the younger man's shoulders drop instead of rise, and for one brief second, the whole night changed shape. Troy was afraid. Anyone could see it, but he was no longer letting fear drive the car. Mara looked at him once, quick and surprised. Then Nolan's voice cut across the speaker system from the shed. Not through the field radio, but the pad address line. "Continue the evaluation." Bishop jerked toward the sound. Mara's face hardened. "Kill the audio." "Continue," Nolan repeated. "Subject response must be documented under stress." Rourke's voice came faintly behind him. "Nolan, shut it down." But the damage was already moving. A gust of wind slammed the equipment shed door against its frame. Inside, a portable propane heater tipped sideways with a clatter. Bishop bolted toward the sound. Not away from it, toward the shed where he had rested after therapy sessions, toward the place his frightened mind still labeled safe. The lead slipped through Mara's glove. "Bishop." No one charged after him. That was Warren's first mercy. "Havoc," he said, low. His fingers turned once. Havoc moved wide, not at Bishop, never at Bishop. The old shepherd cut a slow arc across the snow, placing himself between Bishop's path and the open shed without blocking him head-on. Warren moved with him, slower than his instincts wanted. Running would add panic. Shouting would add pressure. "Troy," Warren called. "Heater." Troy was already moving. He crossed the side lane, slid on one knee, and grabbed the heater's metal frame with his gloved left hand. Heat bit through the glove. He swore, but pulled it upright and kicked the fuel line clear of the doorway. Bishop skidded 10 feet from the shed, trapped between fear and the sight of Havoc lying down in the snow. Not standing, not challenging. Lying down. Mara lowered herself too, both knees in the cold. She did not reach for the leash. She did not say, "Good boy," too soon. did not pour comfort over panic and drown it. She placed her bare hand on the snow. "Bishop," she said, "you have room." The dog trembled so hard the harness shook. Behind the glass, the observation shed had gone silent. Warren could hear only wind, Bishop's breath, and Troy hissing through his teeth as he cradled his burned hand against his chest. Bishop took one step, then another. Not toward the shed, toward Mara's hand. When his nose touched her fingers, Mara closed her eyes for half a second, but did not grab him. She let him choose the last inch. Maeve's voice came over the radio, flat and controlled. Evaluation stopped. Safety breach logged. Medical check required. Rourke stepped out of the observation shed, his face pale under the lights. Nolan followed slower, tablet still in hand. No one looked at the tablet. They were all looking at Bishop, standing in the snow with his head lowered into Mara's palm, and at Troy, who had finally stopped trying to look unafraid. Warren unclipped Havoc's lead and let the old dog remain where he was, steady between danger and trust. The night had given them the answer, not the one Peregrine came to record. The one everyone else had nearly missed. The hearing began before the snow on the training pad had time to melt. No one called it a hearing. Rourke called it an incident review. Nolan called it a documentation correction. Maeve Donnelly called it what it was when she walked into the conference room, dropped her clipboard on the table, and said, "Let's not waste daylight." Bishop was not in the room. Laurel had him in the recovery wing, wrapped, warmed, and resting after a second examination. Troy sat near the wall with his burned hand bandaged in white gauze, the black wrist brace beside it like something he no longer knew how to wear. Mara stood at the window, looking out toward the canine wing instead of at the people who had nearly turned her dog into a case study. Nolan sat perfectly straight with his tablet open. "Before this becomes emotional," he said, "we should establish that the animal broke from handler control under stress." Mara turned from the window. "You created the stress." "I documented a response environment." "You used a speaker system to force one." Nolan's expression remained smooth. "Operational conditions are not always comfortable." Maeve opened her clipboard. "Good. Then let's talk operational conditions." She read the log without drama. Audio level at start, approved. Approach speed, approved. Handler distance, approved. First spike, unapproved. Second spike, unapproved. Source, observation shed auxiliary control, authorized by Nolan Price. For the first time, Nolan's fingers stopped moving on the tablet. Rourke looked at him. "You changed the audio?" "I increased stimulus to complete the stress profile." "You were told to shut it down." "The evaluation needed usable data." Troy laughed once from the wall. It came out rough and humorless. Everyone looked at him. He did not stand. He kept his bandaged hand in his lap and stared at the floor for a moment before speaking. "I used to say that too," he said. "Different words, same thing. I'd call it pressure, control, readiness." He swallowed. "Truth is, I was scared of the dog before I ever stepped onto that pad." The room shifted. Not because Troy's confession solved anything, but because it made the problem harder to hide behind policy. He lifted his right sleeve with his good hand, showing the pale crescent scar on his forearm. "This came from a warrant service 3 years ago. Bad hallway, bad intel. I told myself the dog was the threat, because that was easier than admitting I froze first." Warren watched him carefully. Troy was not asking for forgiveness. That mattered. "Last night," Troy continued, "Bishop gave us signs before he ran. Ears, mouth, weight shift. Mara called it. Dr. Haynes called it. I saw it. and Mr. Price pushed anyway. Nolan closed his tablet. This is becoming anecdotal. Laurel entered then, carrying Bishop's file against her chest. Her teal jacket was unzipped, and there was a smear of antiseptic on one sleeve. "No," she said. "It's becoming consistent." She laid 2 documents on the table. One was her original clearance. The other was the evaluation packet. "My note says no collar loading, no forced cornering, no sound spikes above threshold. The packet used for sponsor observation removed all 3 restrictions." Rourke's face drained slowly, not with surprise now, but with recognition. Warren saw the exact moment the director understood that this was no longer about one bad decision during one bad night. Something had been edited before the lights ever came on. Nolan's voice cooled. "I did not alter medical records." "No," Maeve said. "You altered the operational packet after medical review. That's still a safety violation." Silence followed, heavy and useful. Warren placed one page in the center of the table. The draft protocol from the classroom. Distance, voice, exit path, handler authority. Medical override, hard stop. "This is not anti-technology," he said. "Use drones, use sensors, use every tool that keeps people alive. But don't call a living thing unstable because you built the room to break it." Rourke stayed quiet for a long time. Then he picked up a pen. "Peregrine's demonstration access is suspended pending external review," he said. Nolan stood. "You understand what that does to your grant. I understand what ignoring this does to my people." It was not a heroic line. Rourke looked sick as he said it. That made Warren respect it more. After Nolan left, the room did not celebrate. No one clapped, no one smiled. The cost of being right still sat on the table with the coffee cups and medical files. Mara found Warren in the hallway outside the recovery wing. "I should feel relieved," she said. "You don't?" She shook her head. "I keep thinking maybe I fought so hard for Bishop because I couldn't save others. Men, dogs." Patience I still remember when I close my eyes. Warren looked through the glass. Havoc lay outside Bishop's kennel, head on his paws. Inside, Bishop slept on a heated mat, one wrapped leg stretched carefully behind him. "Saving him won't erase them," Warren said. "I know. But it proves they didn't take that part of you." Mara's eyes shone, but she did not look away. A soft sound came from the kennel. Bishop had woken. He did not rise. He only stretched his muzzle toward the lower gap in the gate. Havoc lifted his head. For a moment, neither dog moved. Then Bishop's nose touched Havoc's through the space between the bars. Small, brief, almost nothing. But Mara covered her mouth with one hand, and Warren felt something in his chest loosen that had been locked there longer than he cared to admit. Later, Rourke found him outside under the pale winter light. "I need you to stay through the season," he said. "Help us rewrite the program." Warren looked toward the canine wing, where Havoc had gone back to waiting. He did not answer right away. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel like withdrawal. It felt like a door he might choose to open. 3 weeks later, the sign outside the training pad had changed. The old banner was gone. No more faster control. No more cleaner outcomes. No more promise that sounded sharp enough to cut through consequence. In its place, mounted on a simple board darkened by weather, were 5 words burned into pale wood. Control begins with understanding. Warren stood beneath it as the first class assembled in the snow. There were no cameras in front of them, no sponsor table, no glossy equipment display. Just 12 adult trainees in winter gear, breath showing in the cold, boots planted on a pad that had been sanded twice before sunrise. Maeve had insisted on that. Laurel had signed off on the canine conditions. Mara had checked Bishop's harness with the care of someone fastening a promise rather than a strap. Bishop stood beside her, leaner after rest, his right rear leg still slightly guarded, but steady enough for the work they had chosen for him now. Not attack, not pursuit, not proof that he could become what he had been before. Observation, recognition, threshold. Havoc waited at Warren's left, wearing his green harness and the small, steady patch. The old shepherd looked out at the class as if he had seen younger humans make every possible mistake and still believed a few could be corrected. Warren did not open with a war story. He had learned long ago that young people heard glory even when an old man was trying to describe cost. Instead, he pointed to Bishop. "This dog is not here to impress you," he said. "He is not here to scare you. He is here because last month, a room full of trained adults almost confused pain for defiance." No one shifted. Good. Your job is not to win a contest against fear. Your job is to recognize it before it makes decisions for you. Troy stood near the front of the line, not as an instructor yet, not exactly, but no longer just another trainee. His black wrist brace was gone. The pale crescent scar on his forearm showed when he adjusted his sleeve. He did not hide it. Warren noticed that and said nothing. Mara led Bishop forward 10 feet, then stopped. "Watch his weight," she told the class. "Not his teeth, not first. His weight." A woman in the second row narrowed her eyes. "He's favoring the right." "He is," Laurel said from beside the medical cart. "So if your approach forces him to load that leg, you are creating pressure he cannot safely absorb." The trainee nodded slowly. That nod mattered more than Warren expected. It meant the new program was not just softer, it was sharper in the right places. Later, Troy demonstrated the first approach. He moved slowly, at an angle, hands visible, shoulders lowered. Halfway in, Bishop's mouth closed, and his ears shifted back. Troy stopped. He did not ask if he should continue. He did not look toward Warren for approval. He simply stepped back and opened space. Bishop exhaled. A small sound. Almost nothing. But Warren saw Troy hear it. That was the difference. Not bravery, but not dominance. Hearing. At the edge of the pad, Owen Rusk sat on a bench with his red and black scarf tucked into his coat. He had started visiting twice a week. He never rushed Bishop. Sometimes he only sat and talked about old snow, old searches, old roads in Idaho. Today, when Bishop passed near him, the dog paused and pressed his muzzle briefly against Owen's knee. Owen closed one hand over the edge of the bench until his knuckles whitened, but he did not grab. He had learned too. By afternoon, the class had stopped trying to look tough. They were tired in a different way, the kind that came from paying close attention. Maeve logged every run. Laurel corrected posture. Mara taught silence, as if it were a skill. Troy reset cones without being asked. Rourke watched from near the office steps, his black notebook open. Warren saw him cross out a line, then write something new beneath it. Not sponsor language. Training language. Near sunset, Rourke approached Warren with an envelope in his hand. "Northwest K9 and Emergency Response Training Board," he said. "They want you, Mara, and Laurel to present this model in the spring." Warren took the envelope but did not open it. A month ago, he would have called it scope creep, refused politely, and driven away before anyone mistook him for useful. Now, he looked across the snow. Bishop stood beside Havoc near the recovery wing. The younger dog's leg still carried its history. Havoc's torn ear caught the last light. Neither animal looked whole in the way brochures liked things to look whole. They looked present. Mara came to stand beside Warren. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I used to think the rest of my life was about staying away from war. And now? He watched Troy guide a new trainee back 2 steps before the trainee even knew he was too close. Now I think maybe I can help a few people avoid fights they never needed to start. That night, Warren did not leave Cascade Sentinel. He stayed in the small consultant room over the equipment bay, boots by the heater, old coin on the nightstand, Havoc asleep on the rug below him. Outside, snow began again, soft against the window, covering old tracks without erasing where they had been. For the first time in years, Warren woke only once, not from a blast, not from a voice calling his name, from Havoc shifting in his sleep. Warren listened to the old dog breathe, slow and certain, and let the quiet remain quiet. By morning there would be work, real work, not breaking people down, not proving who was dangerous, teaching them to hear the warning before it became a wound. Sometimes, the greatest strength is not found in pushing harder, but in learning when to step back, listen, and understand. Warren, Havoc, Mara, Bishop, and even Troy remind us that healing often begins in small moments, a lowered voice, an open hand, a second chance, or the courage to admit we were wrong. Maybe God's grace works that way too. Not always through thunder or miracles we can explain, but through quiet mercy that teaches us to become gentler, wiser, and more willing to protect what is wounded. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what part stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please subscribe and join us for the next one. May peace find you where you are, and may you never miss the quiet warnings that lead you back to compassion.